Hi, everyone. We're back again in NMRAX, and our next presenter is one of the original members of the NMRAX team, who's here today to share with us something about mixed freight trains or mixed up freight trains, or I don't know exactly what. So we're going to have a little bit of fun doing some rail fanning. Everybody say hello to Jordan Kramer.
How's it going, everybody? So yes, today we are doing a clinic. Was short notice clinic, but we got something together.
Excellent.
There we go. So, like we said, clinics, mixed freight train slash grab bag of a little bit of everything. And first thing we're going, to look at is an NS freight train. This was taken out right at the Indiana-Ohio border on a road that's called State Line Road over on the line that runs from Cincinnati to Fort Wayne, Indiana, called the NS Newcastle District. And it's NS 174. And interesting thing with this photo is that you could not replicate this scene today. Lead locomotive's been sold off to Progress Rail. A Dash 9 has been rebuilt into a AC to DC conversion unit. And then the third unit has also been sold off, but it has been scrapped. We've moved over to the CXX Toledo sub. This was a southbound CXX train at Tip City, Ohio. Great place to rail fan if you're in the area. There's a parking lot right by the track. You have the original B&O colored position light signals. And one of my favorite photos from this because of the fall colors and how the scene came together.
Jordan, I want to claim that looks more like a model railroad photograph. That tree is a little bit too red, and the building needs a little bit more weathering, I think.
So that's one of the things I get with this photo all the time is that it looks like a model railroad.
Yeah.
The other funny thing is that in my day job, I'm a driver and I deliver furniture for a furniture company. I've delivered furniture to the building that's right next to the track on the right side that you're saying looks too clean.
Yeah. A great photo.
So, like I said, we're going to be jumping around a lot. We're down now in Kentucky on the Norfolk Southern's Norfolk Southern's Cincinnati, New Orleans, and Texas Pacific, or as most people refer to it, the C&O and TP. First District. This is you're thinking, oh, well, what's so interesting about this? Well, this was a brand new Tier 4 GEVO at the time. And where we're at, it's a place called Crescent Springs, Kentucky. And it's halfway up the hill for NS trains climbing out of the Ohio River Valley going south. And it's steep enough that heavy loaded trains going south need helper engines getting up the hill. And on this day, it was a Tier 4 GEVO that they had down at Cincinnati. But one of the interesting thing is this plate that's in between the number board. I have no clue what's there, but I've been told that's where on other roads they mount the rear headlight. But I cannot confirm that. And while that NS intermodal train was being pushed up the hill, we actually had a northbound NS freight come drifting down the hill. And at this location, it's northbounds can sneak up on you. There's not a crossing for about a mile and a half, and they coast, such as this guy was doing. A Norfolk Southern Dash 9, actually both units are Norfolk Southern Dash 9s. And I believe this was NS 142 or NS 170 at this time of the morning.
What's this location again? I forget.
It's called Crescent Springs, Kentucky. If
Yeah.
you're going up I-75, I-71 coming out of Cincinnati, going south, it's the third exit, and you will be at there's a parking lot / like gym area over to the one side, massive parking lot, and that's where a lot of people do rail fanning at. Very busy line. Great place to see a lot of action too. And here's the head end of that intermodal train that we've seen in the past two shots. Again, another NS-9, both of them actually. NS at one point had over 2,000 of them on the roster. And I believe this NS intermodal was NS 185, Chicago, Illinois to Jacksonville, Florida intermodal traffic. And again, massive, great spot, great tight curve, and just a great place to see trains climbing the hill at Erlanger Hill. And we have another southbound. This is another northbound, sorry. This is NS 170 coming down the hill at Crescent Springs, and the unit behind it. At the time, NS was rebuilding a lot of its ST70s and was starting the rebuild program of the ST70s. So they leased from Progress Rail, I want to say it was around 30 to 40 some odd units of former Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe ST75 ST75Ms, I want to say. Lead locomotive in front is an SD70 Ace, and like I said, I want to say this is NS 170. Chattanooga, Tennessee. Well, back in the day, it was Chattanooga, Tennessee to Conway, Pennsylvania freight. And another NS intermodal. This would be NS 215 with a SD60E and a -9. NS 215 is a Chicago to Atlanta, Georgia intermodal train, and one of the hottest trains on the railroad. And on this day, he had a massive cut of cars to drop off at Georgetown, Kentucky for Toyota's manufacturing plant down there. The SD60Es as of 2021 are mostly in maintenance / local service. And yeah, so you're not going to see an SD60E leading a road train unless it is the office car special. Like I said, there is a mixed bag. We're down at Tennessee Valley Railway Museum for what they have after the weekend after Labor Day. They do what they call Rail Fest. And this was one of the shots. It's Southern 630, a 1905 Alco Richmond produced locomotive, and pulling one of the what they call the Missionary Ridge locals back into Grand Junction after doing the shop tour. And same weekend on the Friday before, I always do this. We leave out of Cincinnati about 6 a.m. and follow the very busy Norfolk Southern's C&O and TP line from Cincinnati all the way down to Chattanooga, Tennessee. On this day, they had, on this version of the year, they had massive track work projects going on, and we only saw one train the entire length of the route. And I want to say when we got down to Chattanooga, we booked into the hotel and went back out and saw like 20 in the span of 4 hours. And so here's an interesting shot. This is a another tradition here in Cincinnati. It's Cincinnati Dinner Train. It's going down to what we call WEBN fireworks. WEBN fireworks is a massive fireworks display in the Cincinnati area, and Cincinnati Dinner Train, well, Cincinnati Railway Company, who runs the Cincinnati Dinner Train, runs a train down there every year, so you don't have to drive because it turns into a madhouse down there. On this year, the GP30, that's the second unit back here, had failed, and the Indiana Ohio Railway, a short line regional here in Cincinnati, had to send out a locomotive to help get the train down into Cincinnati, and they sent out a former Canadian Pacific SD40-2. And the cool thing about the Cincinnati Dinner Train is they run it in 2 sections. And this was the first section. This was the passenger, the coach section, as they called it, with freshly painted C&O Jeep 5704. The 5704 is one of the oldest operating GP7s in the United States and is actually older than Norfolk and Western 611. And this was its maiden trip after they had gotten the paint work done on it. In fact, I believe the paint work was done like 2 or 3 days prior to this trip. That's how close they were cutting it. Another shot of the 5704 on its maiden trip. This is at Undercliff Yard in Cincinnati, Ohio. Undercliff Yard for many, many years was the Pennsylvania Railroad's main yard in Cincinnati. They had a rider hump here, meaning that men would ride the freight cars down into the yard while turning the handbrakes to basically slow the cars down. Nowadays, there's only 3 or 4 tracks left in the yard, and it's a shell of what its former self was. And here's an S200. An S200, before they started the whole precision railroading stuff, was a Danville, Kentucky to Chicago, Illinois intermodal train. Got handed off to the Union Pacific at that point and would typically have UP power on it. One of the things to note about this is that it is morning. Train typically ran in the morning. Nowadays it runs in the very early morning, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And it is summertime. Do we have any questions, John?
I'm coming on right now because I had one.
All right.
How common would it be in the East to see like UP Power coming across like that?
Before PTC got on and was fully implemented, it was very common actually. I mean, we had one time where I went out probably 3 years ago and I saw nothing but Union Pacific and BNSF Power on like 5 or 6 trains that day.
Huh.
But also the other thing about this train was it came off the counterpart to this train came off the Union Pacific.
Right.
And so they would always turn the motive power to go back. In fact, the Spirit of the Union Pacific 1943s made a couple trips through here on this train.
When they do that, when you see that, are they also pulling the The crew, is that a Union Pacific crew there, or
It's a Norfolk Southern crew.
Interesting. Huh.
The only thing that happens is that they get in, so it gets to Chicago, it gets handed over to the NS. The NS puts a crew on it, takes it as far as Fort Wayne, where it changes crews again to a Cincinnati or Fort Wayne Newcastle District crew, and they take it on south.
But they're doing less of this day with it today with these precision railroad kind of methodology.
From what? No. So precision railroading's come in and they said, well, 200, you have all this intermodal traffic. Well, your train's not long enough. We're spending all this money to run more trains. Why don't we abolish 2 or 3 train? Why don't we abolish, we'll give an example, 174. And we'll put all the freight traffic on this 200, make it around 14,000 feet, and send it north.
Uh-huh.
So they're running less trains, but they're running longer trains.
Right.
But with the PTC, a lot of railroads don't want to give up their motive power because it's got a very expensive equipment on it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really, really cool shot.
And so we move further down the track. So NS 200 was first, and typically right behind NS 200, you'd get NS 174, which, as we now know, has been abolished, and its traffic now goes with NS 200. Interesting thing to note about this train. The third unit that day was a Kansas City Southern unit in the Southern Bell paint scheme. Also, 3 cars back, and I want to say it was a 5-car set of pipes for going out west for some piping project.
Are you shooting these pictures with a cell phone camera or a 35 millimeter?
It's a digital. Oh, it's somewhere around here. It's a digital camera.
Okay. Really good.
Well. There we go. So early in the morning, you'd get out about 5 or 6 o'clock, start your rail fanning. And on the Newcastle District, one of the trains you'd see on the southern end, so everything coming south out of Fort Wayne would be hitting the Richmond, Indiana to Hamilton, Ohio area. NS 215 was no exception. NS 215 was one of the hottest trains on the railroad, and it was notorious for them actually putting everything in the siding to let this train run, because it had UPS traffic, it had FedEx traffic, and there was only 2 trains hotter than it on the Norfolk Southern's Newcastle District, and those 2 trains carried Amazon traffic from Chicago to Cincinnati. And here we have NS 25A at sunset out at a little place called Greens Fork, Indiana. One of my favorite shots to this day. The only thing I really am upset with is that the nose blurred due to the speed and due to the fact that I was focusing with the pole. But I was also had about 20 or 30 some odd other people here, because this little town, for 10 years, there was a gentleman there by the name of James Smith, and he would do something called Rail Fest. Every July 4th, you'd come down, you'd bring food, bring lawn chairs and that, and you'd hang out talk stories. Had a bunch of the railroaders that ran the Newcastle district over there talking. Basically, it was a giant get together. And here's NS216, the counterpart to NS215, making its way in perfect evening light at Greens Fork, Indiana. The gentleman's property who I was talking about earlier is on the right side of the tracks. And yeah, great area to hang out, great group of people to hang out with. But this was back when the Tier 4 units were brand new. This is one of the Tier 4 units, and behind it is an SD-70 Ace. And like I said, while we had the get together and all that down at the bottom of the hill, the tracks were here, and everybody would stop and take a photo of a train. On this day, you had this would be NS 143 with a now gone from the roster SD-70 ACU that Athearn has announced that they're going to be doing in HO scale. And behind it is a former CXX unit that was a leaser, now a leaser. And another shot that we can't do anymore. If you notice, this would be an S143 on a different morning, or it might be an S173 with the mixed freight. Elkhart, Indiana to Birmingham, Alabama, or Chattanooga, Tennessee, one of those. But notice the old grain elevator in the background, sticking up behind the second unit. As of June 2021, it is no longer there. Apparently, they had a fire in the building, and it was too much of a loss, so they decided to take the building down. And so we head out west, and we're on the Union Pacific's main line from Chicago, Illinois to Omaha, Nebraska. And we went out there for, I'm sure a lot of us who have seen NMRAX has probably heard of a Modeler's Life podcast. Well, they would have the barbecue, the AML barbecue out there in Rochelle. This was my first trip out there, and the traffic was just amazing. You could go out there and you could see 10, 15 trains in 2-3 hours. Absolutely insane. But this is an empty coal train heading back to the Powder River Basin to get reloaded up with coal to come back east. Same photo of the train. So interesting fact about this was, in the background, that hill. On the other side of that hill, there's a massive quarry. And when I say massive, I mean we were watching these loaded gravel trucks come out every 5 to 10 minutes and not slowing down. And we have a UP intermodal train. Unsure of the symbol, but he was moving right along. And from going east out of Rochelle, there's a hill. And it goes, I forget the small town's name, but there's a hill, and at the top of the hill, there's a grade crossing, and we were midway up the hill, so these trains were sneaking up on us. But he was absolutely moving at track speed of 60 to 65 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Another morning, and we were getting ready to leave, and decided to go out and get 2 or 3 more trains. And notice the NS units behind it with the Union Pacific leading. The reason the Union Pacific is leading here is this is former Chicago Northwestern Territory. And what that means is that there's cab signals. Well, the NS units aren't equipped with the cab signaling system that the Union Pacific uses. So they had to get a Union Pacific leader at Omaha to take the train east into Chicago, where then it would get handed over to the NS.
Jordan, just before you go on, that isn't a spud farm by any chance, is it?
Actually, it is.
Oh, interesting. You don't work there any time?
I might have, I might not have.
Oh, okay. Continue.
That's where they're raising a lot of other spuds?
Yes.
That's scary.
So we're down in Rochelle now at the famous Rochelle Diamonds, and the NSF train coming through. Again, one of the funniest things I've seen is going back through my photos. This year they weren't maintaining around this area in the grass. In another shot that might be in this, or it might be in another clinic I've given, the area is completely mowed. So I guess it varies on what's going on. But also notice the code lines. Code lines are still in. The code lines are for the younger generation, aka people my age. Back in the day, they had the code lines running, and every rail fan hated taking photographs on the side of the code lines because it would show you would see the wires and all that. Well, nowadays they're underground or they're hidden, and you don't see the code lines there anymore. And here's another UP intermodal train, coming through the diamonds. Notice how on the UP side of the diamonds, it's nice and mowed. And you can't replicate this photo anymore. The Norfolk Southern trailing unit is a Norfolk Southern -8, and they're off the roster. And like I said about seeing motive power all over the place, there's more NS units back there. But they had to find a leader for the train, so they found an ST-70M to lead the train. Last time I checked, people who are interested in housing, the house on the other side of the tracks was up for sale. If you're looking for a perfect place to have a model railroad and the perfect rail fanning place. And the NS trailing parade continues with another a BNSF freight at this point, getting permission to go across the diamonds at Rochelle. And I believe this is an ES-44, maybe an AC, I think. I'm not very sure on my BNSF motive power. But there's another NS-9 back there. And another UP intermodal. The leader is an ST-70AH. Basically I want to say they call them AHs because they have extra weight in them to give them extra tractive effort. And this was an interesting one. It's BNSF motive power, and it was a CXX grain train. So my guess is that this train was loaded up somewhere on the BNSF, and it's heading back to Chicago to get handed over to the CXX to take it south somewhere.
I think maybe they just do that so that us model railroaders will be able to buy a whole bunch more motive power units and other flags. Huh?
That was the joke at NS for the longest time when they were doing the heritage units, the spirit units. I mean, the honoring first responders units in law. That was that NS was doing that just so they could get the money royalties from the model train manufacturers.
So Jordan, I was last week. I was out in southwestern Wyoming on the UP Transcon, and I noticed that many of the trains were way longer than I had. You alluded to this earlier, this sort of longer trains. And the other thing I noticed was, not being a super intense rail fanner, is that it's very common to have 3 or 4 units on the head, and then a couple in the middle somewhere, and then another one on the end. Do they do that? Is that also a pattern in the East, or was that because of super long trains?
So it varies. Over here, CXX has found that there's several trains that run over on the CXX. NS does it, but it's a different thing, and we'll get into that. NS does, well, CXX will combine certain trains and put certain motive power units on, like auto rack trains. They'll combine 2 auto rack trains to going to 2 different places, to where when the first half gets where it's going, they just cut off the second unit, the DPU, and go off. And NS does something similar, but not as much as what the Western roads do.
So you're saying when they get to a place where they're going to split, they actually break the train at that second set of
Yes.
power units, and then that train just takes off all by itself.
Yes, that's what they do on NS and NS and CXX. On Union Pacific and BNSF, those units will stay the entire length of the route, from what I've been told.
Okay. Very cool.
And so this is another one during Railfest. In fact, I got a picture of Lionel Strang taking a selfie with one of the lead locomotives. But these 2 locomotives are Dash 9s. And I believe Scale Trains has done both locomotives in HO and in scale. So you could replicate this scene if you were modeling the Rochelle Railroad Park with your mini Prince Lionel and your Scale Trains Dash 9s. Or Athern, because Athern's doing the Dash 9s too. Another shot of the diamond. And again, another interesting thing, 2 Dash 9s leading 2 older Dash 9s leading 2 modern ES44 ACs. And one of the first trains we caught that morning, which was Union Pacific Intermodal. So we're at the top of the hill, and I cannot remember the name of the hill for the life of me. I want to say it's Clayton or something that starts with a C. It's one of these small rural towns that have one stoplight, or if they even have a stoplight, they're lucky. But it's at the top of the hill, and this was taken the Friday before, and Union Pacific was pumping out traffic like no tomorrow. And here was a Union Pacific freight that morning, coasting, having climbed the hill out of Rochelle, coasting back down the hill, back down towards Chicago. And here was from the evening. It was a loaded coal train running into a thunderstorm that had built over this overhead. This thunderstorm later went on to produce several tornadoes later that night over in Indiana. But yeah, it was an interesting time because this was my first time being west of Chicago. And just seeing the flatness of everything was pretty amazing. And NS had Union Pacific had a backlog going on because the train on the right, the train on the right's crew had ran out of time leaving Chicago, so they had to stop where they were, and they were waiting on a new crew. So Union Pacific, with this busy main line, was having to run most of its traffic past this train to get around it. So they would run like 5 to 10 west and then 5 to 10 east. And here was a shot. I forget where we were. We were in the car, and I just took a random shot of this DPU shoving this loaded coal train eastward. And here's another loaded coal train. That was one of the cool things about the line. You would see tons and tons of coal traffic. And I need to get back out there, and I want to go do the BNSF Transcon through Missouri. But they also get a lot of mixed traffic through here. Mixed traffic through here is quite heavy as well, but the intermodal and coal traffic dominate quite a bit on the Union Pacific. As you can tell, we had just survived the thunderstorm. And when I say survive, I mean I've been through some pretty heavy rains, but it was raining so hard at one point, you actually couldn't see the front of the car for how hard it was raining. And so here's an UP intermodal train. I'm so used to showing NS photographs. And you can see, if you look at the background of the photo back here, you can see the train draped up over the hill. And what was interesting would be the engines would be working hard right up until they got to this crossing, and then the lead locomotives would cut off. And they will you would hear the rear unit shoving hard. Other interesting thing about this photo is there is a container here that Union Pacific was trialing out for like 5 or 6 years, and it was I want to say they called it the wedge container, and it was designed to help with aerodynamics of a train. And another train in Rochelle, right before we booked into the hotel room. And this is, again, where spuds are planted. But it was really interesting to see these freight trains moving along at a high clip. And after the storm
That's good.
Oh yeah, this is one of my favorite shots. After this storm had passed, it created this backdrop, and we were standing, so the truck has an interesting story. We're standing there and we're photographing, and the guy pulls up in his truck. He's like, "So you all like trains?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, my dad was a brakeman for the Chicago Northwestern. And he's like, "How long you guys gonna be in town? Because if you want, we could." He goes, he's still around. He would be interested in talking and sharing his story. Well, this was unfortunately, I wasn't in town, but he parked his truck there, and I still like those truck colors. But the other thing is to notice, look at all the concrete ties scattered there. And it's not like they do over in the UK, because I am a UK modeler, where they stack them up neatly. The Union Pacific just threw those ties there, and I don't know if they were meant for replacements at that particular spot or if they were going to do a massive tie relocation. But yeah, it was an interesting detail I've noticed looking back at these photos. And right after that Union Pacific came through, they had another one running, and we then found out about the coal train that was running for a crew and needing a crew change. That they were running traffic around it, but here was another train coming in, and it's getting ready to do more rain. More rain was coming, and yeah, round 2 of thunderstorms came. Here's another Union Pacific train heading west at this point, almost about to reach the top of the hill. And again, like John was mentioning, 5 locomotives up front. Now, on this day, there was only 2 of them online. The rest were going along for the ride.
A lot.
Oh, yeah. And see, a lot of the time, so unlike our model railroads, they'll only put 2 locomotives online, but they might have 6 locomotives. And what I mean by online is meaning that they have the power for 2 of those locomotives, whereas the rest are just acting like a boxcar and just going along for the ride.
Is that just to reposition that motor car to someplace else?
That's exactly what it is. Railroads don't like doing repositioning moves of locomotives, which means like light power moves. They don't like doing that because it's not profitable.
Yeah.
So it's easier to go, well, this train's going this way. Let's just throw those 3 extra units on it to balance out the power.
Just so you know, I'm receiving a lot of questions about growing spuds, so you should be ready for that in the breakout. There seem to be more farmers on today than rail fans.
So, Tier 4 units. EMD's answered to GE's Tier 4. I don't even remember what it is. It's an ST70 something. But
Wow.
Union Pacific was a purchaser of them. And notice the raindrop in the center of the in the camera. It was pouring it down with rain, and I heard this train, and I'm like, I got to get a photo of this unit. I don't know if NS or CXX are going by them. And it was something so unique. I'm like, yeah, I want a photo of this. So I went out and stood in the pouring rain to get this photo. And when I say he was creeping up the hill, John, he was doing about 3 miles an hour. He was that heavy of a train.
That locomotive on the lead looks like it's brand new too, like it's never got any
It
dirt.
was. They were brand new at the time.
It's another one of those pictures when you want to say you need to weather that a little. It doesn't look very prototypical.
Exactly.
Right?
Right. I mean, it's funny. You look at that and
Brand new.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've gotten to see NS units brand new. I mean, I got to see the final 6 heritage units literally 6 hours after they released. EMD signed them over to NS. And yeah, this was a brand new unit. And more older power heading up and trying to outrun the rain at this point and not doing so well. But one of these units has been, this is an ST70, and one of these units has been following around the Union Pacific 4014 on its journey.
Oh, neat. That unit in the lead doesn't have a flared radiator.
Right.
Does that always mean that's an older one?
So both these units are older, actually. But pretty much this was the original. So this was what the SD70 started out as. This is what it turned into. Then they added the flared radiator for emissions, and then they went to this as the Tier 4 version.
Okay.
So, and Metra. We were in Chicago at Lombard Hobbies, and there's Metra. Great place if you're a rail fan. You can park here at the Lombard Metro Station and watch Union Pacific run through and Metro run through.
While you mentioned that, while you mentioned places, that's one of the questions I had. Let's say you parachute into a new place. How do you find out where good rail fanning spots are?
Honestly, like for me, like
Mhm.
in the Cincinnati area, I've grown up here. I've known this.
Right.
These areas are places I've heard or I've read or I've seen the YouTube videos of. Yeah, you can see this many trains through here. This is a count. This is what this is. Or, as I call it, stupid luck. I stumble upon them and I find them. I mean, this is the main route for the Union Pacific out of Chicago. So it's got to be busy. If the line going, and this is the line that connects at Rochelle. So if Rochelle's seeing that many amounts of trains, chances are this place is going to see this many trains. That's another way I find out. I think about it. So it's more of luck plus kind of looking at rail maps and all that.
Okay.
So Union Pacific freight running out of Chicago, coming out of one of the yards, heading towards Rochelle. And notice in the background there's an NS unit trailing third. Plus the conductor waved at this point, which was really awesome. And we're back to Ohio where spuds are not grown. And it's an ethanol train. Notice the buffer car behind it. Buffer cars are there so in case there would be a derailment or a head-on collision that the train has less likely to have a case where the cars could catch fire and explode. You can't do this shot today again. The lead locomotive is a Dash 8. It's been sold off, former Conrail unit. And the Dash 9 behind it's been rebuilt. And another one of my favorite shots, this bridge is in between Eaton, Ohio and Camden, Ohio. And it's a small bridge. I mean, I want to say it's like 10 foot, maybe 11 foot tall. Built in the 1800s when the line was first built and reinforced and still carrying mainline freight traffic across it. On this day, it was NS 174, Birmingham, Alabama to Elkhart, Indiana, mixed freight. And we have a grain train at Camden, Ohio. I've heard rumor that one of our moderators might be modeling Camden for an exhibition layout at some point. But 2 Dash 8s leading a grain train in perfect morning light. I mean, you can't get any better than that for lighting.
Yeah. But I think your early morning shots and your sunset shots that really makes them stand out.
Oh, I'll be honest, the reason most of my shots are that way is because me and the friend that go out rail fanning, in the summertime in Ohio, it gets hot and humid. So we get out early, get out there, and also at the time, NS ran a lot of its traffic at night / early morning. So you could get out on the Norfolk Southern Newcastle district.
Yeah.
Like you would start at 5:30 on a summer morning and see 10 trains by 10 o'clock. I mean, it was pretty awesome. And nowadays they've changed the schedule up and got rid of trains. And yeah.
Yeah, well, on the UP Transcon in Wyoming, we didn't know what the schedules or the shift cruise shift times were, but we did notice that there was a lot of traffic early in the morning and a lot of traffic at night and some kind of dead spots in the afternoon.
That's pretty typical because railroads want their traffic to get to point A to point B either in the middle of the day or leave in the middle of the day or in the evening. So that's what they try to do.
Okay.
So you'll see a lot of traffic, like at Rochelle and that. It's busy all day because the traffic's coming in. And at night it's busy because it's such a busy artery for Union Pacific. Same with the BNSF Transcon. The BNSF Transcon is one of the busiest lines in the United States, I believe. And that's the line it's one of those. Norfolk Southern's line across from Toledo, Ohio over to Chicago, Illinois is another busy line. If you go to virtual rail cams, Elkhart thing, there's always something moving or something waiting to get into the yard.
One of my favorites, Jordan, the BNSF Transcon that goes across the northern tier that I saw at Fargo, North Dakota.
That's another busy one.
That was not only super busy, but in Fargo, there are, a couple of miles worth of grade crossing after grade crossing. It just comes right through town.
Yeah.
And you can literally, sit at a McDonald's or a KFC and eat lunch and
rail fan
outside. That was a lot of traffic.
Yeah,
So Jordan, just before we continue on too much further, I've got one question. I'm sure John's got a few more, but
all right.
Do you use any drones for your photography?
I do, although the drone's down right now.
Again.
The batteries decided to fail on it, and we're not sure what's causing it, but we were taking it up and it decided to do a emergency landing. It didn't crash, mind you, because it was only like 6 feet up in the air, but it came down hard.
Cool. So,
all right, John, what do we got for me?
A related question I had: Do you use a scanner?
Yes.
To pay attention to what's going on?
Yes, I use a unit in Bearcat.
Okay.
And I also have a special antenna you can get, and I cannot remember the name of it, but it's been specifically cut, and I forget how they do it, but it's been specifically cut to pick up railroad frequencies better. So the 1600 to 161 radio frequency range.
Okay. I guess one other thing I mentioned earlier, do you think it would be helpful if we all took up a collection and maybe bought you a better shirt to wear?
Sure.
Because there's a lot of people who don't really know what a gourd yuck is.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We're close to the top of the hour here, and I see one coming in.
So, how we doing all?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm over here in the breakout rooms, and there's a bit of traffic coming through. There's a few people waiting for Jordan already, so he knows how to navigate over there, and he can go over and entertain the masses in his breakout room, and anyone else that wants to go over and have a chat to their mates. If there's a bunch of you out there, get together, send an email. There's plenty of spare rooms there. They can jump in and do whatever they want. So, yes, wearby.com/MRL-Aussies. So, I think we'll hand it back over to Brad, or I'll hand it back over to John, and he can wrap it up.
So you can go over to the breakout rooms on that link and video chat with each other and hang out and ask Jordan all your agricultural questions. And rail things.
Yes.
Well, thanks so much, Jordan. Appreciate you putting that together, especially kind of at the last minute there. We always love seeing your pictures, and we'll see you. We'll see you over in the other room.
All right.
What? What'd you say? I can't hear you, Martin. What are you saying? Subscribe? I'm already subscribed to the NMRAX. What are you talking about? I hit the bell. Oh, you want me to tell the? Oh, I'm sorry, Martin. I'm dealing with Martin Jenkins. You know, the wonder from Down Under. This guy. Anyways, he says he wants me to help you. You're watching the NMRAX, which is freaking awesome. All the work that Gordy and Martin and Brad and Speed and all these guys have done. If you want to watch more of it, what I would recommend is you try your blue shades. Would have been a lot cooler if I did it faster. It should have been something more like this. Anyways, apparently what you're supposed to do is there's a little bell icon, and you hit this little bell icon, and then somehow that notifies you when you get a new video if you subscribe. So you got to hit the subscribe button, then you got to hit the bell icon. I mean, it'd be easier, honestly, for me, as far as I'm concerned, it'd be easier if they just mailed them to you. You know, put them in an envelope, seal them in, take the tape, seal it in an envelope, and just mail it to you. But anyways, this is what I was asked to do. I was asked to help you get it organized, ring the bell, subscribe, and you'll get tons and tons of NMRAX videos, which are all excellent. Was that what you wanted, Marty? Did I do it right? How was that?